How many of you in this audience has benefited from a community service learning experience? Tell you what, it's dark, it's gloomy outside. Stand up if you've benefited from a community service learning experience, please. Now let's take this in for a minute. Because when you give something to the community, you create an energy that we all benefit from. Thank you for standing. Most movements, indeed all movements, need a storyteller. I come to the conversation of community reinvestment as a health disparities scholar. In 2001, I was at the University of Missouri completing my postdoctoral training in clinical neuropsychology. And some of my students then asked me, why have you got involved in community organizing? Your work as a clinical psychologist is about diagnosing brain-related complications. It just so happened in 2000, I saw this particular piece with Martin Luther King Jr. And I realized, folks, I was not having the impact I wanted to have. I wanted to be a drum major for something. A drum major for justice, as King had identified. So I became involved with health disparities, trying to understand why certain groups of people have diseases at a much higher rate than other groups of people. A couple of years later, I wrote a paper with some of my colleagues to focus on this term we were trying to brand health justice. It is disturbing to me that when I move around the country giving talks, that so many of us are unaware that when you look at educational outcomes, you see a link with chronic disease. That is, the lower your socioeconomic status and educational attainment, the more likely you are to be burdened with numerous chronic diseases. But here's the big piece. How many of you knew that when you live with diseases such as diabetes, that is poorly controlled, hypertension, that is poorly controlled, that you're also increasing your risk for a condition such as Alzheimer's disease? If you knew that, please raise your hand. And so we look at health-related quality of life, these factors. You hear it every day on the television about folks getting access to services. So I had this idea. I knew that we needed to change the dialogue on addressing health disparities, but I wasn't sure how to do it. I knew that me as an individual, I couldn't do it by myself. So I started looking around on college campuses, paying attention to what happens when students walk through the door. There's a crisis, and that crisis is college retention rates. How many of you are aware that there is a retention crisis on college campuses? Okay. So I had this harebrained idea. I said, well, okay. As a researcher, I started looking at, 1 in 3 first-year students will not make it back. Whoa, who graduates from college? Who doesn't? Why does it matter? Upon investigation, I realized the most vulnerable person sitting in that college classroom is a first-generation college student. Did you hear me? The most vulnerable is a first-generation college student. I am a first-generation college student. I said, well, hey, if I can help these students repurpose their energy, I may be able to help shift this crisis. And so, fostering and stimulating a shared purpose. This person has one light. But this is what happens when you start thinking about community reinvestment, leveraging beyond the campus. Now, I told you earlier that someone who is low SES, lower educational attainment, they are more likely to have a disproportionate burden of chronic disease. Well, the interesting thing about first-generation college students, they come from those homes. They come from those homes, and if the retention crisis is what it is and continues to be, those students return back to those homes. So I said, when we think about community engagement, there's a proximity effect. Those first-generation college students, they know those communities. And so I started working with them to say, hey, let's go into those communities and see if we can affect change. One of the first projects when I came to Wake Forest was a mobilization project where we focused on helping students, well, encouraging students to work in our health disparities program, going into the community and spreading the word about risk susceptibility for Alzheimer's disease. In doing that, we realized that we needed to formalize our program in order to create the synergy we wanted to see. So I formed a program, Coaching Health Professionals Innovation Program for College Students, CHIP-C. In that program, all students from various disciplines. See, one of the things that happens in education is that we train people in disciplines. We don't get them talking to each other. So what I have done is bring students from all disciplines together to have them talk to each other. Give them a project, see how they figure it out. Because you know, as professionals, we do a very bad job in talking to each other, which kills us in terms of partnership problem solving. This is how it would look, folks. The students go into the community. We go into faith-based organizations. We huddle up, and we try to develop a plan that we believe would be practical in terms of delivering to our community. I've had the chance to measure the success of our program. And what happens is that we shift the mindset of students. Most students arrive on college campuses with the renter's mentality. I'm just here to get my degree and I'm leaving. But when you get them invested into the community, they take on an ownership attitude. They feel a part of something. It repurposes that energy. It doesn't become just about the degree. It becomes about how they live in service of others. Oh, the question, which are you, a renter or owner? Within our program, we talk to students about understanding that you don't have to wait for someone else to create your dream. You create it for yourself. And when you go into the community and you start identifying how you can serve and how your service is of value, you start figuring out, you know what? I do have something to give. Let's be honest. Across our campuses, so many students suffer from the soft bigotry of low expectation. And those low expectations create this kind of risk-avert attitude. You know, you take classes that you feel you can only be successful in. What are we promoting in doing that? That's not very helpful in my opinion. I like when students come to me and they can articulate the risk they've taken. Because I then understand for them that they want to do something bigger than the moment they find themselves in. Students will often say to me, well, if I take this particular class, it's going to be too difficult. Yeah, we hear that, right? But see, when you repurpose the mindset, you say to them, there's a testimony through adversity. There's wisdom that comes through adversity. And when you thrive through adversity, you're then able to truly give something to someone else. So, 7 radical ideas that when we're huddled up, we talk about. First one is tomorrow is now. You don't have to wait to share your genius with the world. Do it now. It doesn't matter that you're a freshman. You have a purpose. You are the best solution. And most importantly, don't end your college career just seeking a degree. Get some things along the way to make you a true asset to our community. In my book, I have a chapter on how to internalize critical feedback from your professors and how to turn that feedback into energy, no matter how harsh the feedback feels. Because as Goldsmith points out, what got you here won't get you there. And I do believe that when you land here, you should be thinking about launching somewhere else. That's the thriver's mindset. The mindset of inertia says is the one where you avoid any type of risk. You know, you hide from adversity. A Mountism. Education and opportunity gives people a chance to save themselves. That's why I believe when my team goes out into the community and we're trying to figure out how best to deliver information so that individuals can use that information to improve their well-being. If we do it right, then I don't have the uncomfortable experience when I'm talking to folks in the clinic and they say to me, I wish someone had told me that this condition plus these circumstances can set me up for that outcome. We have to get ahead of these things. You know, we talk about Alzheimer's disease and cure. But I think a very effective conversation is to talk about prevention and think strategically about how we deliver education to folks so they have the best chance to participate in their best outcome. So, Community Reinvestment 2.0. There are a couple of themes here. First-generation college students have a purpose. But when they're sitting in the classroom, they are at risk. It's easy to become discouraged when everyone you're sitting with comes from privilege. But I do believe that you can repurpose that anxiety, that uncertainty, by showing them that their service is of value. And I think that if we do that, although college retention is multifactorial, there's so many things that influence that. But I do think if we can just get folks to realize that through their education, they have the best chance to change the station of their family's existence, that would do something remarkable for them. So when I think about the time I invest in students, I will choose that investment and I will fail up with a student than sitting in isolation trying to do it by myself. Thank you.